think about the title of the episode? Or the title of the Zoom call?
I thought it was hilarious.
Okay, I didn't know if y'all seen that or not.
I did see it. It killed me.
Are you dead now? That was my morning creativity coming forth.
It was great.
That's all I have. I'm tapped out for the day. It's good to hear y'all's voices. Y'all want to do a podcast?
Yep. Let's record something about some comics or something.
Oh, that makes me so happy to hear you say that. So, by the power invested in me by the permission of Craig, I now announce that the episode 129 of the Southern Fried Geekery podcast has now commenced. We may now all be nerd boys forevermore. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Fantastic. Matt didn't answer.
Sorry, I was muted. Hey, yeah, good.
the mute button.
He muted himself.
Again.
Just the people at home understand that. That wasn't Caleb or I muting him.
I mean, I don't know that it wasn't Craig. I just know that it wasn't me.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to say it wasn't me.
It's exactly what a villain would say, Craig.
That's right.
Well, welcome back to another Sunday morning with your favorite Central Arkansas fanboys, geeks, nerds, and general operators in the world who try to be, both decent human beings and read comics at the same time, which is what I think we are. So hope everybody's had fantastic weeks. In this crazy, topsy-turvy, odd, upside-down, ever-changing world we live in, where we are currently, just for the sake of history, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of raging social reform, and in the midst of a weird world where comics are, to dial it down more specifically, comics are really changing as an industry. So it's what a time to be alive, as I twiddle my fingers. As usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And I'm Craig Lance.
And I am glad that we are back again. So before we get started with anything, and because I think this is going to play into the episode at large, we just want to acknowledge and recognize the passing of a comics icon of both the 20th and 21st century. Mr. Dennis O'Neil passed away this past week at the ripe old age of 81. I know from, and I can only speak for myself, but I think I speak for everybody else. We would not be who we are in some sense, and comics would not be what they are without the work that Denny O'Neil left. He left a huge footprint. He had an amazing and major impact on the industry at large. He teamed up with some of the most dynamic and really visually adaptive artists of the 20th century. Left, and I'm not going to start dropping titles because I know that we're going to talk about a few of them, but I just want to say thanks, if nothing else. Thank you to Dennis O'Neil and the work that he left us and the world that he handed to us as comics readers and writers and artists and fans and, whoever you are listening to this show, whether you know it or not, he changed your world, and that's pretty cool.
Well, so a few years back, I went to a convention and an artist had on his table a note that said, "I drew your childhood."
Uh-huh.
I would say if that were true, Denny O'Neil wrote our childhood.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about, who had that sign. And
Yeah.
If he drew the childhood, it was because Denny O'Neil wrote that childhood. And
That's right.
Whew, I get goosebumps even talking about it. And, is it sad? Yes. I never had the opportunity to meet Dennis, and I wish I had, even in passing, but to live to 81, and to have the life that he lived and the legacy that he left behind, that's, we should be so lucky to do a quarter of as much in our own times. It's outstanding, the life that he lived. So,
yeah. And to kind of echo your sentiment, just thank you for what you gave us. Thank you, Denny O'Neil, for what you left, the legacy you left behind for those of us to read and enjoy.
What would be really cool? If a company, it could be a company like Pop or even a company like the DC or the Diamond whatever's plastic series, if they put out statues of actual comic creators, other than like the Stanleys and the Kirbys and the Ditkos. I think there's some statues of them floating around, but it would be really cool if they would do like a signature series of all of these iconic writers and artists and editors who shaped. And I realize those wouldn't sell to the masses. Those are like particularly for a niche set of individuals like ourselves. But that would be really cool. Like I would totally have a Herb Trimp statue. I would totally have a Denny O'Neil statue, a Steve Ditko statue in my office. That'd be cool.
Yeah,
As long as they don't actually call it the Diamond Plastic series, I think that'd be a good idea.
Look, I'm not branding, so I'm gonna pass off that to our PR department. So that's
the Diamond Plastic series.
Yeah.
Made of PVC.
Not one of my finer moments in branding, but anyway.
Yeah.
So, did you guys get some comics read this week?
Yep.
You got some short stacks?
Yep.
Are you proud of me for not forgetting that?
Yeah.
I say as I go to grab my short stack so I can pull 3 books from it. Hold on. You guys go ahead.
I'll kick us off and start because it piggybacks off of what we just talked about. So when the news broke that that Denny O'Neil had passed away the other day, I immediately, like I think all of us are wont to do, make sure to check myself when I talk about him. It's like, oh, let me make sure that he actually wrote this, because I don't want to, like, it's such a great man, deserves absolute credit for what he did. I don't want to misapply when I talk about how the impact he had in my life. So I went back and made sure I was talking about the right books and that he worked on, and made sure, because the man worked as an editor most of his life, he worked as a writer most of his life, he did so many things. Like, you wanted to make sure that you're like, okay, he wrote this and edited this. Like, let me get my bearings straight. So I went back and I pulled a few books out of my physical collection and my digital collection that I knew that he had worked on, just so I could revisit it, kind of reminisce in the world that he left us, and look at some of his work that he gave us. So I pulled 3 different books, and I'm not gonna go in detail because the works speak for themselves. Also, you guys might have read it and want to talk about it. So the 3 books that I pulled and my short stack for this week are Batman number 232, which was written by Dennis O'Neil, drawn by Neil Adams, with inks by Dick Giordano, and this is called The Daughter of the Demon, and it's where we get our first real look at Ra's al Ghul. I don't think it was necessarily it might have actually been Ra's al Ghul's first appearance, but it was not.
It is his first appearance,
okay,
and it is my book of the week.
Okay, so I'm not getting into it, but I just want to say it wasn't Talia's first appearance, but pick that up.
Correct.
Craig is going to dig more into that later. The second book that I grabbed, which I think is a really, really cool book and doesn't get nearly enough attention as some of his other works, it's The Question Number 17. And the book is called A Dream of Rorschach. This was done by Denny O'Neil, of course. Dennis Cowan drew with Rick Magyar on the inks, and Tahana Wood did the colors. This book is neat to me, and it's incredibly interesting, not because of its impact on the legacy of the question. Like, he didn't introduce anybody awesome. This is not a first appearance or anything, but in this book, the question is taking a trip. He's trying to solve a crime, as he might want to do, and as he gets on the plane, as he's walking through the airport, he pulls a book. He needs some reading material while he's flying around, and the book that he pulls is none other than The Watchmen. And if you look at the first page of that book, it says a special thanks to Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And the question is reading this book, and he kind of goes on this inner monologue of Rorschach, because those 2 characters, they're different, but they're kind of molded from the same clay, so to speak. And so it was really neat to see that in a comic book. That meta commentary moment delivered by Dennis O'Neil was just really amazing. And then last but not least on my short stack is it's a 9 or 10 page comic that comes out of a larger work, and it's called Black Brother, and it's found in Savage Tales #1, which you guys, all of us here, but everybody listening knows that I'm probably the second largest Conan fan on this podcast. I'd say that Matt holds the first, and I say that because he can punch harder than I can, and I don't want him to cleave me in twain for saying that I'm a bigger Conan fan than he is, because he'll beat me up. But so this book, like I said, it's found in Savage Tales #1, and it's called Black Brother. And this is interesting because this does not have Denny O'Neil's name on it. This is credited to Mr. Sergius O'Shaughnessy, which is a pen name that Denny used. I'm not sure historically an exact reason he had to use that pen name. I don't know if it's because he had contracts on other stuff and he wasn't supposed to be writing for Marvel at the time, because this was a Marvel book. I'm not sure if his exclusivity contract with DC at the time prevented Dennis O'Neil from doing it, but Sergius O'Shaughnessy is absolutely Denny O'Neil. and Gene Colan did the art on this book. And long story short of it, it takes a look at this kind of Black Panther-esque type figure, but it's not a superhero story. There's this man who is the governor of this African nation, and there's a lot of... it feels like it's kind of a post-apartheid world where he's leading the government, but the white people in this African nation are not happy with what's happening, and they set him up. They set him up to take a fall and to be politically damaged and essentially have to go into exile. Which, if that that doesn't sound like a historical figure that you should be familiar with, and I'll let you go do the Googling to figure out who that's supposed to be, because it's a very, like, again, meta commentary, and I think that is what Denny O'Neil was really good at. He delivered a narrative that both enticed you with its action, with its vibrancy, and it was fun, and it was super heroic, and it kept you on the edge of the seat for being a piece of fiction, but it also spoke to the world at large, and it spoke to the realness. And there are a lot of people that will wave their fists and lament the world we live in now, and they don't want politics in their comics and in their fantasy and in their escapism, and it's redundant screaming at the gods, because it's always been there, and art has always been political. And a guy like Dennis O'Neil built that. Like, he didn't build the foundation. That foundation was laid long before him, but he was building up on the first and second floor to give us what we have now. And you can find some of that in those 3 books, so go check them out.
All right,
Greg, you ready?
Next. Yeah, I'm ready. I'll go next.
Okay.
I continued to read the Nom and read issues 20 through 30.
Nice.
Still loving that series. It's Marvel, of course, and different artists, and I don't remember the writer off the top of my head right at the moment. So go back and listen to last week's episode, and the writer will be there. I also read Daredevil #20 by Marvel Comics. Chip Zdarsky, Marco Cicchetto, Mattia Iacano. This book is just absolutely fucking amazing, and people need to be reading this book. If you're not reading this book, I have to ask you what you're doing with your life.
Second.
Because it's not being productive.
I'll have to tell you what I'm doing with my life later.
Yeah. Well, you're missing out. I'll just put it that way.
I'm failing you, and I'm ashamed.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I know why you dropped off, but you were wrong back then, and you're still wrong now. So you should get back on it.
It's self-abuse is what it is. It's self-abuse.
It is self-abuse. This book has everything you want in Cape Comics. It absolutely does. Anyways, the last book I read was Something is Killing the Children, #7 by Boom Studios. James Tynion IV, Werther Deladara, and Mikel Muerto. This book has been one of my favorite horror books this entire run of it, and it just continues to go along. At the end of the last arc, she killed the demon that was killing the children, but we found out that the demon had left a whole lot of children around, and now these children have to be vanquished. So absolutely amazing series, and you should be reading it if you're a horror fan.
Hey, Craig, because of the internet, you kind of glitched out when you said what number Something Killing Children was. What issue?
Yeah, it's Something is Killing the Children, #7.
Okay, thanks, buddy.
Yeah. It's the start of the second arc. And that's my short stack.
my short stack, starting with IDW, I read Mountainhead #4. This is the series by John Lees and Ryan Lee. So this series took a left turn that I did not predict. It has gone full-fledged into a Lovecraftian country. So that was an interesting detour. Definitely not bad.
Kind of like the planet itself that we live on.
Yeah.
Kind of taking a left turn into Lovecraftian territory.
Yeah. Just so that happened. Also as Craig, I read Marvel's Daredevil #20. It's fantastic. The series is fantastic. And I want to make sure I say that I'm saying this as not a traditional Daredevil fan. I've never really felt much of anything for that character. He's always just kind of been there. Always had some good stories here and there. As far as I'm concerned, that held my interest. This is amazing storytelling. It is so damn good. I loved this series. Chip Zdarsky's writing, is so good in this. And, so many associate him with good comedy for right reason, but he's just killing it from a plain old dramatic storytelling, viewpoint in this series. Not to mention Cicchetto's art, it's complementing that in the amazing ways. But this is so good. Man, this series is good. And it's not a fantastic series. There's not a lot of big, fantastic things. It feels very street level. Even though this issue and the issue before had some super powered-ish villains show up, it still just feels very street level. There's not a lot of big, fantastic things happening. But yeah, I cannot recommend this series enough. It is really good. Also, along the same line of thinking, I read DC's The Batman's Grave #7 by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch. This
also
is
wonderful.
Amazing. This is the best Batman thing I have read in longer than I can remember. This is putting all other the Batman stories in the past 15 years to bed, as far as I'm concerned. It is way over the top good. There's humor in it that's amazing. The dialogue between Alfred and Bruce Wayne, Batman, is great. Their whole relationship, everything feels right about this book. And the humor in it is very subtle.
It's usually Alfred.
Yeah.
Usually comes up with the humor.
Yeah. Alfred's delivering it feels like your typical clever English humor. Warren Ellis obviously being English, every bit of that feels dry. And their dialogue back and forth is some of my best moments in the series. And it's just overall, it's just a great story.
It really is. If you've been looking for a Batman detective book to read, because we really don't get a lot of that anymore. Mostly we get Batman as a superhero story. This is Batman as a detective, occasionally fighting people story.
Yeah. And when he fights people, he's fighting them in the way he traditionally should. These are street level fights, and they're illustrated beyond reproach by Brian Hitch. The way he illustrates these fight scenes are incredible. The way he illustrates these fight scenes. The way he illustrates the page in general is great. So I cannot recommend this series enough.
I'm going to give away one of the funny moments in this book because it's just so freaking funny. The Batmobile gets blown up, and he has to walk to a place for Alfred to pick him up. And you have people standing on the corner in the morning waiting for the bus to pick him
and
up.
Batman just very calmly and idly just walks past the bus stop. It's one whole page of that, and I laughed out loud at that page. It is hilarious.
Yeah, I've been slowly catching up on this based on y'all's recommendation. This and the Jimmy Olsen book are the two of the best books that DC's putting out right now, and it's largely for the same reasons. Like, it's those little comedic, funny as hell moments that you don't see coming, and the one-liners are crushing it.
Yeah, and again, this is Batman the way I envision Batman. So
it's a traditional Batman story. It's a detective story.
Matt, you mentioned Brian Hitch. Like, he has had an amazing 2 years coming back into the spotlight, because he was a huge name for a long time, and then he kind of kind of sunk away as far as for some reason, but like what he did on Hawkman at the first run with Vendetti and now this, some of the best work I've seen him do in years. It's stunning. Like I don't know what he
Yeah.
was waiting on, but he's kind of having a second or actually his career's been long enough. It's probably a third or fourth win, but the dude's just coming back into the picture in a big way.
Certainly a
Yeah.
renaissance moment for him.
Oh, absolutely. It's killer work.
Yep.
So I
Good
think
books by all of us.
high fives all around. Go team.
All right.
I think Matt just left us in a really good place to segue over into our roundtable book with the comment like this feels like a traditional older version of Batman. Like it feels like those early iterations. Um, I think that's a good place to kind of segue over into the book that we all read this week. How about you guys?
That
Mhm.
works for me.
All right, man. Well, before
I don't
we,
know that I buy that it's Batman-esque, but we'll run
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. It's like, does it still
I-
count as a
Bat.
segue if you? Does it still count as a smooth segue if you stop to explain the segue?
We love you, Caleb.
I'm going home.
You are home.
Shit.
You signed up for this abuse.
I did, and I love you for it. Well, no, so I meant that in the way that the book that we all read this week is modeled after a traditional style pulp era book. Like it has all of those quote unquote greatest adventure nuances to it, and it feels that way.
Yeah.
Kind of like what Ellis is doing with this Batman feels old school Batman. This feels old school pulpy to me. And that book is none other than The Adventureman. But before we get into the meat and the potatoes of the book, which I know Matt loves to hear me say, let's make sure that everybody knows this is a brand new book, number one, fresh off the shelf. If you haven't read this yet, we are going to spoil a few things because this is a comics talk show, right? Like we got to spoil a few things, or we can't really talk about what makes it excellent, in my opinion. Now, you guys might not share that view of its excellence, and we'll find out why. Bum bum bum. Stick around, kids. So before we do that, just fair warning, one more time. I'm gonna put the time markers in the show notes as I am wont to do most of the time when I remember and I'm not lazy. But don't spoil this for yourselves. If you need to jump ahead, that's fine. But spoiler warning, as only SFG can deliver, with lots more
Yeah.
work than it requires.
So what you're saying is there's spoilers coming.
Yes, that literally could have
You
been
will
that
be
whole
spoiled
2
shortly.
montage that I could have just
Yes.
dropped. I'm going to start letting Craig do the spoiler warning.
No, dude, you're perfect, man. You're doing fantastic. We just, are
I feel
doing our thing.
criticized.
Giving you a hard time in the background. It's what Matt and I do.
Yes, Daddy, harder. What? So, Adventureman. This book was delivered to us by the mighty Matt Fraction, who I just love. The dynamic duo of Terry and Rachel Dodson with Mr. Clayton Cowles, one of only 2 letters that exist in the whole world. There's only 2.
Was he VC's Clayton Cowles in this
Nope,
one?
he was just
Nope, he's just
Cowles in this one.
Clayton Cowles. Okay.
One of the best, like we like to give him shit, but the man works hard. He is busy, and he is actually one of the best letterers in the industry. So, hats off to him. What did you guys think? I've already said I thought this book was excellent. What did you guys think of this tale?
Yeah, very strong.
Yeah, I think the book's really good. I love the writing. I love the art. Thought it was
Art's amazing. The
Yeah.
character design is off
Yeah.
the chart. It's lit, as the
good.
kids
Lit,
say.
as the children would say.
I'm gonna need a moment for recovery. I mean, I love Terry and Rachel Dodson. I think they're fantastic in whatever they do, but they swung for the fences on this one. It was just great. So this kind of had a little bit of a Bill Willingham feel, as far as the writing and the tone goes, like from Matt Fraction. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but it really, really nailed that. Like what? And I mentioned The Greatest Adventure. That's a book that he wrote that takes a lot of the Tarzan and the Warlord
Yeah.
of Mars style things, like that universe that was delivered to us, and it meshes them all together. This kind of feels a little bit like what that was, kind of a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen feel. So what this book is, I'm gonna drop you into a world, and that world is very Man of Tomorrow-ish. It is set back in the day. I would say mid 30s, maybe early 40s, but I don't think it's quite there yet. Late 20s, mid 30s, and the city is in danger. Bad things are happening. Lightning is crashing in the distance. And oh no, what are we going to do? Because that bad things are happening. And a phone rings, and it's ringing in an office that's set obviously on the penthouse floor of a large building overlooking the city. And somebody's butler comes running in. It's like, sir, it's the mayor. He wants you to call out the troops, release the police balloons or the whatever, like the things that are going to save us, the police planes. What are you going to do? And this guy just kind
The
of,
things that are going to save
I mean,
us.
he's fumbling.
The police planes.
Hey, the police planes is a direct quote. So
Yes, it is.
I didn't make
Yes.
that up. I'm not that smart. And this guy, he just kind of scoffs at it. He's not feeling it. He's not having it at all. This is ridiculous. So he picks up a different phone, and he pushes the only button on the phone, and the voice on the other end of the line says, "Yes, Commissioner," and he says, "We need you, son." And this is the direct line that the commissioner has to the Adventure Man, which is kind of a very Batman-esque thing. And because then the book takes you to, I don't necessarily know that we would call it a cave, but it is the lair of a very wealthy, well-to-do man. There's a dinosaur skeleton floating in the back. We've seen that before. And he just says, "Hey, don't be afraid. Help is on the way." And as he steps into the light, he just says the city needs Adventure Man. But Adventure Man doesn't stand alone. No, that's silly. He can't save the city all by himself. He's got to get together this legion of friends, this bastion of justice, this group of people who are going to aid him in his fight. And these are very, very pulpy tropes. You have Jim Royale, who is the gentleman. He's kind of a magician figure. You have Chagall, who is a super pharmacologist science witch, which is amazing. You have Akal, the timeless one. You have the brawler of the Bowery, whose name is Lonnie Langlost, and you have Phaedra Phantom, who is kind of a white witch, not white witch, the White Queen, looking figure. She's walking around in her, some might say scantily clad, but very suggestive clothing, lingerie, and she says it's showtime, folks, and she's the ghostly saint of the burlesque, um, and is just gorgeously drawn, and they're being called to action. They as they look out, this is kind of that pinnacle moment that we've seen in so many books where this is it. If this team of heroes don't step up, everything is going to be lost. If you're reading the Black Hammer series right now, this is the moment when the anti-god shows up and they have to defend the city at all costs. Or if you're a fan of the Fantastic Four, this is when Galactus comes in and the world is about to be destroyed. Like this is it. These figures are all that are standing in the way of certain doom. And so Adventure Man shares with this team a serum, and it's not the super soldier serum, which is trademarked by that other company, because that would cause a lawsuit. But it's essentially that. He's like, "Hey, drink this," and of course they're all like, "Well, what would this do to us, or can we handle it?" And he's like, "Look, you're all heroes. You all are. I've seen you go above and beyond in capacity. So, but the world needs us. So whatever damage this is going to do to you is worth the cost, because you got to be a hero right now." And they jump into action, and they're just going for the gusto. But what fun would this be if they didn't have a counterpart? If there wasn't a legion of evil, so to speak, that was going to meet them on the battlefield. And that legion of evil, this group of ne'er-do-wells who are just very much clad in the iconography and the imagery of fascist governments throughout our history, and piracy, because pirates are awesome. Um, that they're being led by Baroness Bizarre, the devil's own daughter, Hellcat Maggie, who is the one of the six sisters of Satan, the Meta Mage, who is a wizard of woe, Slugger Dunphy, who might have the best name of the whole group, Nightmare of the Nonagon.
Yeah, I think that's how I said it too.
Is a Nonagon a nine-sided ring? I don't know.
I don't know.
And the Automa Terror, who is just a robot of sheer, striking fear into toasters everywhere. So he kind of looks like a toaster. And they meet him on the battlefield, and they're just going to go to town. And when I say that there is a fight, there is a mighty fight. Like each one of these figures is the equivalent and capable counterpart of our heroes, and it just gets real nasty real fast. And all through this battle, you don't really know who's going to win, and each one starts. It's kind of a great team scene where they're bouncing back and forth, and they're using their capabilities to aid one another. And right as the story is about to climax, right as the story is fixing to culminate in these last moments, the word balloons on the page dissolve. They go from being quotes being delivered by these heroes, and they become text, and the text kind of fades as they go down to the page. And imagine, if you will, from a movie scene, something akin to the Page Master, where it zooms out, and there's a kid sitting in bed, and this kid is being read this bedtime story by his mom. And he's kind of upset. He's like, "No, it can't end this way. What happens? You can't leave me on a cliffhanger like this." Like the main bad guy like had a gun pointed to Adventureman's head, and like it can't end this way. What happens? And the mom says, "Well, that's the end. That's the way the story is going to go. Um, there's there's nothing I can do about it. This is just how these things play out." And this makes our little buddy, our young child who's sitting there in his little underoos, unhappy, and he throws a fit. He says, "What the butts?" Which is is a very strange and comical way to put it. And the mom
Yeah, it
says,
reminded me of Princess Bride, the way
"Yeah, right,
kind of,
yeah."
yeah.
It had that tone, and the mom says, "Well, look, that this is just this one story, but the cool thing about these adventurous tales, you can make them up. You have a bedroom full of these really cool and iconic playthings, these toys, and you can write the adventure the way you see fit. You can make up the end. You can go to sleep tonight and dream him up a better tomorrow. You tell me how it ends tomorrow." And so mom walks out of the room, and she's walking out. You see all of these little sound bites coming from outside the house. There's cars honking, and you can tell that the world that they live in is very loud. It's a very modern world, not the world that we faded out of earlier in the story. And she reaches up and she reaches behind her ears, and she takes off these little hearing aids that she has, and all the sound kind of goes quiet. I mean, there's a cat meowing in the background that the speech bubble for the cat just kind of fades away and just becomes white, and it's silent, and she can sit and she can read her book, uh, and you kind of get the understanding that she can unplug from the world for a little bit, because she's deaf, and she was not born this way. She actually became deaf because of some noise damage that we don't get the full picture of. It doesn't really explain what happened, but there is one little line that says, when this happens, the only silver lining is that you can unplug. Well, this family that she is, it's not just a mom and kid. They are two members of a larger family. Mom is one of six siblings, the best I can tell, and she's there living alone, or she's there living with her kid, and this big family meets up every week. They're Jewish. They meet up for Shabbat dinner every week to kind of on Friday nights to kind of close out the week, and really for just family time connected to their heritage and religion. But it's noisy when this happens, as you might imagine. Her son is not the only hyper-verbal one in the family. Like, all of her sisters are. I mean, you guys have been to family gatherings, you folks at home. You know how noisy it can get. And so while she's supposed to be paying attention, she turns down her little hearing aids, and she can kind of ignore it. She can sit in her own head with her own thoughts for a little bit, and she'll just get the bullet points from her son later. He'll let him know what happens. It's really easy for her to sink back in a crowded room most of the time, but not on this particular occasion. This particular Friday, later on in the story, the next day, basically after she's put her kid to bed, they are meeting, and it's loud, and people are talking about their days and what they've seen. And the dad starts to notice her father, the father of her and her six sisters, adopted sisters, presumably, maybe not, but he notices that she's not responding to anything, and you can see in a speech bubble, just in gray, he's shouting her name, but she can barely hear it. Uh, and he calls her out. He's like, "Hey, you're not with us here. You're not paying attention. You're breaking the rules. We're supposed to be having family time, and you've got your hearing aids off, and you're not playing the game." Like, so they part of their ritual is they play essentially the Adventure Time game. Tell me one adventurous thing that happened to you today. Tell me your high and your low of the week, and what adventure you did, as this kind of shared family moment. And she's not participating in, and so she, and in a really clever and creative way to introduce all of these characters, she goes through in an interior monologue telling you how she lies to each one of these people. She lies to her son Tommy, why she turns down her hearing aid so she can drown him out. She lies to each one of her sisters, Ursula, Rita, Sarah, Evie, Bitsy, who I love Bitsy. She might be my favorite as far as just who she is, and Regina. She's lying to them as to why she turns her hearing aids down, and it's really just because she feels inadequate to each of their very loud and extraordinary lives. They're all doing something incredibly cool. One of her sisters is an engineer. The other one, saves lives in emergency rooms. You know, they're incredible athletes, and they're just, I mean, all of them live an extraordinary lives, and she thinks that hers is less extraordinary. She doesn't have as much to say, and so because she works in a bookstore, and she lives a very quiet life. She likes her cats. Nothing exciting really ever happens to her. And so she lies to him. She tells him, she makes up an excuse about why she drowns him out and just gets the bullet points later. And it's because it hurts her ears. It gives her a headache, but it's just to hide her own inadequacy as a person. So the next day she gets up and she goes to her bookstore, and she's sitting in there, and it's very quiet. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a customer walks in and says, "Pardon me," which, by the way, shout out to Clayton Cowles. It's not often we mention a letterer, but for this particular woman, her speech bubbles they're kind of translucent. Where everybody else's speech bubble is stark white that blocks out the art behind the speech bubble. These particular speech bubbles are translucent. You can see the outline of what's happening. It gives it kind of an ethereal feel. And this woman is obviously not of this time. She's clad in a black flowing dress with a hat with a hairpiece with a big feathery in it. Very something, if you are familiar with X-Men, again, you might be used to seeing the White Queen wear. No, not the White Queen, because there's no underwear with this, but something in that very late 1800s corset and flowy time. And she wants to know, do you buy books? Because she's got one that she wants to sell, and she plops out this tome and lays it on the desk. And this tome has got the Adventureman sigil on it. And this is not just any book. I mean, this looks like an artifact. It's leather bound. It's clad the Adventureman sigil on the front, which kind of looks like an upside down vertical Jesus fish way to think about it. If you've seen them on the back of bumper stickers that have the little squiggly
Right.
fish, and it's that standing vertically. And so she's looking at this book. She's like, "Where did you find this? I've never seen anything. Do you mind if I have a moment with this?" And of course, the lady's like, "Yeah, sure, take your time." "Oh, beg your pardon. Do you have a section on the strange and the supernatural?" And of course she does. She's like, "Yeah, it's right back there." And so the woman says thanks, and she goes walking to the back of the store. And you guys know how bookstores are in the modern day. They're not getting a lot of foot traffic, right? Like, very few people go into these. That's part of the reason she
Right.
works here. They're not used to having a flood of customers. So as this lady walks in with this book and goes to the back of the store, another figure walks in, and it looks to be two or three of them, but they don't acknowledge her, and they're all cloaked in shadow, and they're like dark and billowy and ominous, and wearing a big broad-brimmed hat, which is kind of weird. And they don't really acknowledge her. They just take off to the back of the store, and she's just like, "Oh shit, two customers at the same time? This is ridiculous. Can't be having this. This does not happen." She follows them, and she's trying to talk to him. It's like, "Hey, sir, ma'am, whoever you are, like, where are you going?" And they walk out a door, and she's like, "Hey, that's not an exit. Stop. Like, what's happening?" And she walks out of the back of the building, and she sees these shadowy, ominous figures shoving this lady into what can only be described as a 1920 futurist's idea of a car. Um, it looks like a Beetle, like a Volkswagen Beetle, except the doors are inverted and it's more sleek. It's got this very hot rod mod but 1920s look to it. And they're shoving her in the back of it, and they take off. And she goes to run towards them, and one of the figures who's Cloud and Shadow just kind of approaches her and tries to stop her, and borderline assault, like physically assaults her. And as she gets closer, she realizes that this guy is not he's not a human. He's kind of insectoid. Like he's got red glowing eyes and a gaping maw. He kind of, I know I keep referencing other stuff, and I don't mean to suggest that this book is any way derivative of those works, but he kind of looks like a nihilist in the face. He's kind of this bug figure, and he, freaks her out. She's, I think her exact words were, "Holy guacamole, that's gross," because that's what I would say. Uh, and he attacks her, and she is not she's not the kind, she is not a wilting violet. You're not going to attack me. I'll fight you back. And she tries to kick him in his abdomen, but her foot goes right through him. And like what you would expect to happen doesn't happen. These bugs, insects fly out of the now gaping hole in this guy's midsection. And he just dissolves into all of these skittering insectoid creepy crawlers and runs away. And as she sees the car drive off in the distance, the lady puts her hand up in the back window, and it's got the Adventureman signal on it, and trips her out. And so, as you might want to do, is she sees this Adventureman, and she's been reading the books to her son. She takes it home to him, and she shows him the book, and like they are both just up in arms. Like this is this fantastic history come to life, and it's not supposed to happen, and what's going on. And as the kid starts looking at the book, he starts putting some things together, and he starts flipping the pages, and he sees an outline of their own house, and the mystery deepens from there. And that's where I'm going to lead off. That's where I'm going to fade away from the book, and I'll let folks out there go and read it for themselves. But this is a hardy book. This book has almost got 60 something pages. You're getting 3 issues of comics, or right at 3 issues, maybe two and three quarters, for the price of one, in a story that, if you love mystery, if you love pulp fiction, if you love early sci-fi, I think you're absolutely going to adore. Now, I've said enough on this. I'm going to throw it over to my boys.
Yeah, I love the pulp aspect of this in the first half, but where this book really picked up for me was in the second. It almost feels like 2 stories, right? You've got the story that was being told in the first half,
mm-hmm.
and then you've got the family and so forth in the second half. And to me, that's where I really loved this story, was the second half of this and where it's going from here.
That's interesting, because I'm the exact opposite. The first half of the book I liked much, much better than the second half. Not to say I didn't enjoy the second half, but man, this first half of the book, the character designs put this story just over the top for me. These character designs are so good, man.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. I just, I love the pacing of the second half of the story. Not that the first half was bad. Again, both halves are good. It's just, it's funny how we have a different viewpoint on what our preference was.
Well, and to make
interesting, I should say.
And to make it even funnier, I'm right in the middle of you guys. I loved everything about this book from page 1 to page 58. I was bought into it because, I mean, like I said, I'm a huge fan of stories written by Robert E. Howard. I'm a huge fan of like The Greatest Adventure. I love Tarzan more than Tarzan, actually. I love like John Carter of Mars. Those books, which are not Robert E. Howard. I'm not like, don't come at me.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Your weird 1920s novel knowledge. I'm just talking about that era. Like, I love the pulps. Even though it's 2020, I'm kind of fascinated by this early idea of the future And so I was completely sold at that moment in the
It
book.
to me, it very much had uh, a bronze man of the future feel to it.
Yeah.
Doc Savage.
Doc
Yep.
Savage,
Rocket Man.
yeah, this where he has a team of people working with him, and it had that very much had that feel in the first half.
No, 100%, and purposefully, and
Oh yeah,
so well done. And then to get that, like, I was bought into that story. I was completely sold. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is nostalgia in its purest form. Even for a guy like me, who's a little bit of a younger guy, like this is tickling all my fancy for this stuff that came before my time, and really paved the path to where we are now in pop fiction. But then it took that left turn, and like I said, it gave me that page master feel. But it did so in a way that and even before we got to the library scene, I still felt like maybe I hadn't jumped into a different world, which is really hard to do because I think a lot, and I can't put my finger on what it was about that, because you read a lot of these stories where they close the book and then they jump to a different thing, kind of like you said with the Princess Bride, where you realize
right.
you're not in the same world. Like, these are two different worlds. There is the fictional world inside the book, and then there's the world outside where the family or the grandpa and the kid or whatever are sitting around. I never felt that with this book, and I don't know if it was just the particular language or the way that the pacing was set, but I never felt like it was drawing me. Like, I really did feel like this was a before and after story, and maybe that is predicated on the fact that I'd read the synopsis of the story, or I'd read the solicitation in previews, and I kind of knew it was coming, but I don't think
See,
so.
I didn't know it was coming,
Uh huh.
and it was a complete left turn for me.
Was it
But it wasn't a bad left turn.
right?
It was, yeah. And then the way they tie the two worlds together is amazing. But it's Matt Fraction, so you kind of expect amazing from him.
You do, and he delivered. And Matt said, Doc Savage, and there was so much of that. I think it's interesting, the juxtaposition of the pulling the team together and the pulling the family together. And, like, I think this really is an exercise in tropes. It's an exercise in blending genres in the medium of comics. A lot of times I feel like when we talk about comics, especially with us and the different tastes that we have on the show, you have the super series, you have super comics, hero comics, and then you have slice of life comics. And we think of those in many times, not all the time, but, and I'm not speaking any type of absolutes, but sometimes we think of those as separate, like there is a gulf between them, because a lot of times there is. I think this book is showing you that you can take a framework for a superhero series, and you can use that to write a slice of life comic, or you can take a slice of life comic and you can use that as a framework to write a superhero series. Like, they're not separate, and like, the medium of comics is what presents you with that ability. And which, again, as somebody who's kind of interested in the science behind the page, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it it was a very good, very well done, um, as you say, juxtaposition between the two.
Have Now, I'm sure the answer to this question is yes. Have you guys read many books that Terry and Rachel Dodson have worked on together?
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so I was not shooketh when I saw how amazing the art was,
Yeah.
but just talk about pouring over each and every page. There is so much stuff to find in all of these, like, these panels and pages. It's just, it'll make your eyeballs smile.
They didn't take any panels off.
No,
The 58 pages worth of panels, and they didn't take one panel and do it lazy.
no, there was no quote unquote phoning this in. Like,
Yeah.
there is so much texture and so much information. Like, she's the main character's walking down the stairwell, and you see all of these pictures behind her, but also, like, I'm looking at this panel right now, also in the midst of all these pictures there is a taxidermied crocodile head hanging on the wall. And this is in the latter part of the book, but there's also oars hanging on the wall. There's an easel in the background. There are nautical flags underneath
I
the
think
stairwell.
I think we're going to find that her family's tied into all of this in some way. We
Oh,
just don't know yet. Yeah,
absolutely. I think this is a little bit of a history of her family, but
right.
that aside, like even just the texture, like in this one panel, and the history that it gives you. And this is on page. Let me see if I can figure out what page this is. It's like 40 something, and that just speaks to
Yeah.
exactly what you were saying. With they don't take a single page off. There is a story being told in each and every layout that is just phenomenal. I got incredibly tickled. Have y'all read the book that they did for Image years back called Red One?
Yes, which
Um,
was fantastic as well.
oh yeah, it's kind of a Black Widow esque type story. But in Red One, one of the characters, one of the main characters, rides a motorcycle and she wears a long scarf and has a helmet. There's a single panel where they show our mom, our main character, getting on her scooter to go to work, and it was so indicative and such a throwback to Red One. I saw that and it just made me smile because not only are Terry and Rachel reaching back into the history of pulp comics and the history of the medium to tell this story, they're reaching back into their own contemporary work and also putting little smidgens, little snippets of their own history as artists into this work, and like stuff like that just makes me giddy.
Well, one thing I would say that they did very, very well in this comic, I mean, they did lots of things very, very well, but from the art standpoint, is drawing it very pulp-like, but giving it a modern feel.
Right.
Those two things are not always easy to do. Sometimes when you read these books, like we talked about Doc Savage earlier, when you read a modern Doc Savage, it's drawn very pulp-esque instead of modern a lot of times. And I feel like that really did service to this book to give you the pulp feeling, but draw it in a modern style.
I can't disagree with you at all. Hey, Matt, you mentioned that you really love the character designs in
Mm-hmm.
the first part of the book. Was there a standout to you, or was it just a collective thing? Like, what was it about those character designs that really spoke to you?
Well, let's see. So let me see if I can figure out what page this is. So on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So on page number 8, the top panel on page number 8, that panel spoke to me quite a bit. This villainess and her outfit, I had deep appreciation for. If you want to take a look at that, I think you'll figure out why. But I mean, like, well, like she's got these gear tattoos. She's carrying a baseball bat with spikes on it. She's in roller skates. Her roller skates have spikes on it. Her counterpart, it looks like something like a pirate, which with some rockin' sideburns and one of those, classic big muzzle pistols.
Oh, his chops are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just all these character designs, and then if you go back one page, the 2-page layout is it's awesome, man. These are awesome looking character designs. Right underneath Hellcat Maggie, the guy. I mean, I just loved them, man. These are so good. These character designs are so good. That was the difference maker in this story to me.
Right.
That's what put this story way over the top for me, is what the Dodsons did here.
I can't argue that either.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a balance between the action and the adventure, and like boiling that tone down to the sensualness of it. I mean, so like I'm looking at Baroness Bazaar, who's one of the leader, and she's a pirate, but like her outfit is very, I mean, it's like, number one, if cosplayers don't have a fucking field day with this book, they're lazy. But number two, it's very like it's a little bit S&M, but it's also a little bit quirky. Yeah, like and her mask has got the little horns on it. Like there's just so much attention to detail. I did not notice on the page you were talking about the gear tattoos. I didn't notice that till right now, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's like a roller derby, just badassness to that.
Yeah. Oh, it's killer, man. They're so good.
So what are you guys thinking? You guys sticking on it? Is it going on the pull list? You in for the long haul?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick on it.
I'm going to give it another issue.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, after it was discovered that the first half of the book essentially was not going to be actually what the book was, I was like, oh,
Right.
so I don't know. If I get more of these characters in the first half of the book, that'll keep me on it because these are just, again, killer.
I think the ending had to do with pointing us in the direction that we're getting those characters in the modern
I
setting.
hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
There's gonna be a blend of the two. And I will say, like, I agree. Like, I'm glad they delivered the first issue in the format that they did, because if I had have gotten issue number one and it had have been the first half of this book, and then I went and picked up issue number two and it had have been the latter half of this book, I would have been annoyed.
Yep, that'd have felt like bait and switch.
Yes, and so I'm glad that they delivered that in the form of one like oversized issue, because that really, like, that elevated both sections to me personally. And I realize, like, I'm in the middle of you guys, but like had I gotten them separately, it would have annoyed me, and I would have absolutely been on like Matt's end of the spectrum. But because it was,
I'm sure I would have been too.
yeah, because it was all one thing. Yeah, I think this is.
I want to point out the price point of this book was only $4 for 60 pages worth of comic.
Yep.
Which is a bargain by today's standards.
Oh, largely, like that many pages.
Basically, 3 comic books, 2.5 comic books for the price of 1.
Mm-hmm. It just makes me happy.
Now, I will have to say there is a page in the second half of the book when the sun draws in this tome that made me want to just rip my book up, because you don't draw in ancient books. You don't draw in first print books ever, for no reason ever.
You don't do what?
Draw. The sun takes a marker and draws in the book.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah, and it just it went all over me.
But that's how he solves the mystery, Craig.
I don't care.
You put tracing paper over it or something.
Exactly. That's right.
I see. It didn't make me want to tear up my comic book. It made me wanted to slap the shit out of this little.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll go
shithead.
that route. We'll go that route because I didn't really want to tear up my book. It was too good. But yeah,
clearly this child needs to be attacked by the villains in this book.
And his mom owns a bookstore, and she let him do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're establishing that she's not just a knockout parent. I guess that's what they're doing there.
Yes. Yeah. She obviously has failed this parenting. In parenting.
Soft parenting. You know what? That's it. I'm writing a letter.
All right. Calm down, Karen.
Worded letter.
Can I speak to the manager of Adventureman?
I need to speak to the manager of Image Comics, please.
Yes. You showed other kids that it is okay to write in first edition books.
You showed adults that it is okay.
Yes.
This conversation speaks to my glaring hypocrisy on the matter. Because on one hand, I'm just like, oh, these things aren't meant to be sacred. Fuck it, it doesn't matter. But I also find books that people have drawn, and I'm like, no, like who? Property of Timmy?
No, they're meant to be sacred.
Yeah, you're the reason
in print.
Yeah, Caleb's the reason I can't go to the public library anymore, because he's the one that drew penises all over the dictionaries.
Oh no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I would never do such a thing. Spread those lies about me. Well, all right, guys. Well, Craig, we kind of already have some foreshadowing into what your book of the week is. So why don't you take us there?
Yeah, we talked about a segue into old Batman earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This actually is old Batman. Batman number 232, of course, DC Comics, written by Denny O'Neil, and Neil Adams and Dick Giordano did the art. I could not find who the colorist was on this book, so I'm assuming one of the two of them. This book starts off with Robin sneaking through a window of a boarding house. As he enters the house, 2 armed men with tranquilizer darts shoot him. And then back at Bruce Wayne's penthouse, a message is sent to Batman, which is interesting because it's sent to Bruce Wayne's penthouse with a photograph of Robin and a note. And the note reads, "Dear Batman, we have Robin. Save him if you can." So Batman decides he's got to return to, as he calls it, his ancestral home of Wayne Manor so he can use the resources of the Batcave to kind of, go over the photograph and scan it and see what he can find. And as he enters the home, he is confronted by a balding man in a green cape. And when he asks who it is, of course, we find out it is Ra's al Ghul. Ra's asks Batman to help him save Talia, his daughter, and he has a note and a picture that is very similar to the same as Bruce has of Robin. Batman soon learns that Robin and Talia are being held in Calcutta by a group known as the Brotherhood of the Demon. On the way to Calcutta, Batman has a flashback of his origin story because, we have to have that like every 40 issues in a comic book. But
don't forget the movies.
That's right. After finding their location, Batman, Ra's, and Ubu, who is Rash's servant, enter the hideout where Batman is attacked by a trained guard leopard. That's right, a guard leopard, like a dog, except a leopard. Batman,
oh God, I want one so bad.
Batman ultimately beats the leopard by breaking its neck, and other than the leopard, the hideout is empty of people. But Batman soon finds another clue, which leads the trio to the Himalayas. Batman, once there, finds the trail of their prey, and they begin climbing to the top of the Himalayas. Little does he know that they're being tracked by a gunman. The gunman fires at them, and Batman quickly moves into action, dispensing of the would-be assassin. As he does, Ubu and Ra's move into safety on a ledge above. Batman begins his ascent again, and as he does, a helicopter flies overhead, and Batman just kind of goes, "Yep, kind of figured that." So he's pieced all of this together. And when he gets to the top of the mountain, the guards threaten him, and he tells them to put their weapons away as they both know they can't use them. He quickly finds Robin, and when the guards tell him he can't untie Robin, he says, "Sure I can, watch me," and unties Robin while the guards do nothing. After getting Robin released, the guards tell him to get on his knees as the Supreme Brother enters, to which Batman replies, "I'll give the kneeling a miss if you don't mind, and even if you do." Batman then goes on to explain how he solved the mystery, that it was Ra's all along. Batman and Robin quickly clean up all the guards, including the Supreme Brother, who turns out to be Ubu. Ra's then reveals that he wishes to retire and that Talia is in love with Batman, and he wishes Batman to take his place. And that is where the book ends. So it's been a long time since I read this issue, and it is still absolutely fantastic. It shows Batman as a detective. It shows Batman as a fighter. It shows Batman in every which way Batman. And it's Neil Adams art, so it's absolutely beautiful. But man, I had so much fun going back and rereading this issue. It really, really spoke to me, and added a level of sadness to Denny O'Neil being gone.
So I read this book this morning, actually. Just because I was playing my short stack, and so much brilliant writing.
Oh my God! I mean, it's got some 70s cheesiness in it,
right?
In the dialogue, but that's okay because it's brilliant. The story is brilliant.
Well, I for one, I love that. Like that's actually to me that's a feature, not a bug, because I kind of look at, especially for comics, comics are kind of this. Uh,
Time capsule.
Yeah, they are almost a roadmap of American history delivered in real
Hmm.
time because they are so current. They're using the language of the
Right.
day. They're
That's right.
speaking to the moment that they're being written in. And you know, now I think television does a little bit of that, but not nearly to the effect that comics has done since the 1920s.
Well,
Um,
people aren't going to go back and for the most part, watch a lot of television from the 70s.
right.
People will go back and read comics from the 70s. And it's when it's in print, I think it's more in your face than it is in a television show, anyways.
Right. I love it. So Batman missed a golden opportunity in this book, though.
What
If
was that?
I mean, look, I'm just saying, I've had a lot of times where I dreamed of the day that someone told me to get on my knees because the Supreme Brother was about to enter. I'm just saying.
I loved his line of, I'll give the kneeling a miss if you don't mind, and even if you do.
There was
He
another.
had some great one-liners in that entire book, but
There was another one where he's entering the, I think he's entering the cave for the first time, or he's kind of first coming into contact with Rachel Ghoul's cult members. He There's these guys standing there with a gun, and there's a one liner about men and their like people who, oh, what does he say? I'm trying to find it. Uh, Little men who supplement their masculinity with bang sticks or something along those lines.
yeah, it was great.
Like
Bang sticks.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was like it just cracked me up. And how little has changed in, like, this book was written in the 70s, 50 years. How little has
right.
changed. Um, do we want to say who shows up at the end of this story, or did you? Like
I
fully.
did it. Yeah, that Talia shows up and
Oh
it's
no,
revealed that
there's.
she's
Oh wait, no, that was a different story. Never mind. Sorry.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Talia's there at the end
Hmm.
because Rosh brings her out. That's the last page, the big reveal. But yeah, I kind of assumed it's been a long time again since I read this, but the Supreme Brother I figured was Rosh, but of course it was Ubu.
Yeah,
But the
it
way
was.
that they go back through and they have this moment of Batman explaining how he knew Rosh was leading him along the entire time
Yep.
was fantastic.
It's kind of one of those choose your own adventure moments because they're then giving you, like, it's the writer, it's Denny O'Neil being smart, saying, "Hey, look at this stuff that I put in." Like
To
on
give you the hints.
right.
Yeah.
He's like, "Let me,"
More like
because
Encyclopedia Brown, I think, than
hmm
Choose Your Own Adventure, where, at the end
Yeah.
of Encyclopedia Brown, you got like the big reveal about how he knew all the stuff that happened.
right. It's inviting kids who were the main audience of this to be detectives, just like Batman. It's like,
That's
"Hey,
right.
look at these clues I planted for you. Now go back and see how you can find these clues in other works." It was
Yeah.
just brilliant. I mean,
Well, and I love where you have Batman being a detective, which ties into
Yep.
what we were talking about earlier. And,
Yep.
and that's what a good portion of this book is him being a detective. He's going through and he's solving this mystery, but all along he already had it solved. He was already smarter than Rosh at the beginning of this.
well, and I mean, on the topic of this book, and I know this man is not somebody who gets a lot of attention or wants a lot of attention or is really that impactful on the history of comics, but I don't think you can give Neil Adams short shrift on this either. Um,
No,
that was
he doesn't want any attention. Yeah,
that was
yeah.
Yeah.
being facetious.
No, the art in this book is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And the character design. I mean, Rosh is still designed that same way today.
Hmm.
When you see Rosh, it's still the same design.
When you
And,
when you
and
when you open this book up and you see from that first panel of Robin climbing, you're just like, oh yeah, that's why Neil Adams gets to talk a little bit of shit whenever he wants to.
yeah,
Like that's why he just
yeah,
gets to. Um,
yeah.
Yeah.
it's because it's. Uh, I took a picture of the Talia al Ghul kissing Batman on the cheek this morning, and like I just because the
It's the most
expression,
awkward kiss ever.
the expression on his face is amazing. And very few artists other than Neil Adams, especially with the printing capabilities of the time, could have done what he needed to do to pull that moment off. It was brilliant.
Absolutely. That entire issue was brilliant, from the writing to the art to the colors. I mean, I have zero complaints on this issue. There's a reason why it's still. Go ahead.
This issue of Batman is one amongst several that was adopted into an episode of the Batman animated series.
Mm-hmm. Really? Okay. Mm-hmm. I really need to watch that series.
Yeah, you do.
I know. No,
and I'm not gonna. Yeah, and my tone will forever be thus. When you keep prioritizing things like, oh, I don't know, let's say something like Michael Bay.
Hey, I gotta get through these movies.
He's never gonna let this die.
I know he's not, but that's okay.
It's a derelict of duty, is what it is, kids.
Yeah, it's something for sure. One of these days, I will get the Batman animated. I am almost caught up on the Harley Quinn show, which is fantastic, by the way. And if you're not watching, you should watch.
Nice. Yeah, Paul Dini, like, as far as people who have written Batman, obviously, you know, Denny O'Neil's up there, but I'd argue that Paul Dini is like on the. And in this analogy, Mount Rushmore has more than four faces, but he's on the Mount Rushmore of Batman writers. Paul Dini absolutely is.
Well, to me, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams are the John Byrne and Chris Claremont Batman.
I think that's
sure.
Yeah, like I won't try even. No, that's right. there's that's a fact. Matt, have you read the like while we're on the topic of Paul Dini and the Batman the Animated Series? Did you read the book about that Paul Dini wrote? It was essentially a graphic novel that so Paul Dini was attacked one night. He was like almost beaten to death. He got mugged. And so he, like in real life, and he wrote this graphic novel to kind of help him work through not being terrified to walk outside again. And so as he writes this, he in the book, he shows how the characters as he wrote them in the animated series were like the angel and devils on his shoulder, helping him work through this. So if you haven't read that, it's and I'll have to go. I've got it on my shelf somewhere. I'll let you borrow it. But somebody
Eduardo Risso illustrated that, correct? Or did he just do the cover?
I can't speak to that off the top of my head. I'm not sure. It's been too long since I've looked at it.
I'll make a deal with you, Matt. I'm almost done with the Harley Quinn series. When I'm done with that, I'll start the Batman animated series.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's not a deal.
I will.
Greg.
And that's not a deal.
No, it is a deal. It is a deal.
No. He has to, in order for it to be a deal, he has to give you some consideration for it, because that's how
I've given
this man enough consideration for a lifetime. He has used up the well of consideration by neglecting the Batman animated series.
Listen. So my thing is that I need a head key from Lock and Key so I can consume all of the media I want to consume in a timely manner. The problem is there's so much media to consume that you have to pick and choose. And sometimes Michael Bay Transformers wins out because it's on your list.
Don't blame your spoiledness of choices on your bad decisions.
Oh, they definitely align. I'm not saying that there's not a correlation there, Matt. But, like your comic books you buy, if you buy it, you read it, no matter how crappy it is. And I'm the same with my movies. It just takes me a long time sometimes.
Are you talking about a Denny O'Neil book, Caleb?
I am not, no.
Okay, so I want to talk about Denny O'Neil a bit more. So, definitely feel like it needs to be mentioned that a lot of people don't realize is that Denny O'Neil is the one that corrected the path of Batman in the comic books. Mm-hmm. Many times Frank Miller is given that credit with Dark Knight Returns, but Denny O'Neil is the one that corrected the path of which Batman was on, which was they were basically the Batman comic books, which were selling abysmally for years, whereas comic book version of the Adam West show, except they were, just bad. They weren't the Adam West show. They were that cranked up to 11 and puked on. I guess is how you
Yeah,
would say.
it was bad.
So Denny came in and said, we need to get back to the roots of the character. And, a lot of people, if you listen to interviews with him, it's interesting. He's very humble. He is anything but an egomaniac. He is anything but full of himself. I guess that's why him and Neil Adams worked together so well. Is because they were so opposite. Because people come in, you listen to interviews with him, and they're like, well, you're the one that, turned Joker into a true homicidal maniac. And he said, no, he was always that way. Go back and read the first appearance of him. He was that way. He was just turned into something comical, just like Batman was later. He's like, I just went back to writing him the way he was created. And, as far as Batman,
thank God he did.
Yeah, I mean, as far as him becoming like the Dark Knight again, that's all Denny O'Neil's direction. He's the one that made that, and he brought Neil Adams along with him. But he's the reason that all started, is he convinced editorial to let him do it, because they had nothing to lose, because Batman was just it was trash at the time. And there's so many, he again, this is another moment that was illustrated in the animated series, is he wrote,
Matt.
Yeah. Well, no, you don't actually. That's the problem.
I do. I'm telling you. I got
That's
it.
the problem.
I hear you.
But him, Batman confronting criminals in the alley and it telling them, you can either walk away or I will break you. Those little pieces of dialogue that Denny wrote are just amazing to me. That, again, and this is what, this was all before Frank Miller brought The Dark Knight Returns.
There's a line in this, in 232, where he's confronted by somebody. He confronts somebody to try and find out where the Brotherhood is, and they say, "Oh, I can't tell you. They're going to kill me." And he says, "You assume I won't."
Right.
It's fantastic. You know.
Yeah. He really, really played an enormous part in riding the ship, and not to mention benefiting DC publications in doing so.
Oh, absolutely.
And and there's a lot of, if you listen to interviews with the guys, interviews are great. Whenever Batman Begins came out, he said that, of course, he had, been retired. He had retired since. So he said him and his wife went and watched Batman Begins, not knowing anything about the movie. So he was surprised that, Ra's al Ghul made an appearance in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't given any credit for that. So when he left, he said he picked up his phone and called, who did he called? Whoever was over DC Creative at the time, and left. He said he left him a voicemail. I think it was Jim Lee. He said he left him a voicemail. Said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, me and my wife just left the theater and saw Batman Begins. Really great work. We really appreciate it. Just wanted to call you while I'm on my way to the pharmacy to buy cat food for dinner." Because he didn't get it. Because he did, and he was laughing. He did it as a joke, but he said he immediately got a call from DC Creative saying, "Oh, sorry, it was an oversight," and they sent him a royalty check.
They need
yeah. But
wow.
Yeah. But he did that.
If he hadn't called, it would have remained an oversight.
Yeah,
in all likelihood.
And see, look, on some level, I realize I'm a cynical person. I don't think it's an oversight as much as they were seeing what they can get away with, because nobody signed a contract the right way. And he called them off.
Well, Denny says he believes it was a total oversight because, he said, he left DC on great terms and still is in contact with them. And he's like, he either really believed it was an oversight or he's very, very forgiving about it. Either way, it illustrates he was just he's a great interviewer. If y'all can go back and find interviews with him, he's excellent. Some of the best interviews he did are on Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man on Batman.
YouTube is full of them. You can find pictures. There's talking about podcasts. He's done a few with Word Balloon that I've listened to that are really incredible. Before we go too much farther, Matt, are you doing a Denny O'Neil book? Because I absolutely can if we want to do a O'Neil-orama.
No, I thought about doing a Denny O'Neil book as well, but what I was going to say regardless.
Right.
I was going to talk about, I thought about talking about the book where it's the book where he brought the Joker back into the Batman universe as an evil villain. That it's that iconic cover with Batman on the playing card. That's the one that turned the Joker, because before then the Joker was not Batman's number one villain.
No, and I'm surprised.
That issue, issue 251 is the one that that's the reason, that issue's the reason that the Joker is Batman's number one villain.
Mm-hmm. And like you're speaking to, people give a lot of credit to Frank Miller for making Batman darker. But again, like Denny O'Neil is the one who turned the Clown Prince of Crime into a serial killing psychopath.
He didn't, though. That's what he says. He goes, I did not turn him into that. He was like that from the beginning. He always makes a point to say, I didn't create that. I just brought him. I brought Batman. I just brought him back to the roots.
Yeah, well, right. So, but he hadn't been that for a long time, and maybe that's my misspeaking. Like he gets the credit for at least righting that wrong, because they had polished him up way too much.
Well, they made him very much like the television show.
Yeah, the Cesar Romero character.
Yeah, giant typewriters and so on.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic to look back and see, because as Matt said, Batman was on the verge of being canceled when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams took over that character. And they absolutely did say Batman. Would Batman have been righted at some point? Probably. But, who knows? The fact that we had Denny O'Neil available to write him the way he did, all the credit in the world, because what we have is Batman today you wouldn't have without that.
Well, and it's like that issue of Rorschach, or the issue of The Question that I was talking about in my short stack, where he gives a shout out to Alan Moore and company that made, and Dave Gibbons that made that book happen. So he was reading that stuff at the time, and he was seeing the tone that could be done. And I think, largely when it comes to comics that we read today, most roads lead back and go through Alan Moore. And so he was looking at that was done, and he was like, oh, I can really go there, especially with books like The Question, which, that character being created.
Well, he's given credit for bringing The Question back to a street level surface, making him more like Rorschach, which everybody always thinks it's the other way around, that Rorschach was The Question, which he was. His character design was copied from that.
Well,
but
I mean,
it's his personality, it's the opposite.
What? Wait a minute, what?
The Question was brought to be more street level after the Watchmen.
I think it was
when Denny O'Neil got a hold of
him. Denny O'Neil definitely made him, he brought out the grittiness of it. But so like Rorschach as a character was always he's a representation of those Charlton-esque figures, and he's Ditko's character.
Right.
He takes all of these things that Ditko made, and Alan Moore, like The Question, Alan Moore funneled it down to be Rorschach. So Rorschach was absolutely modeled after those types of figures that Ditko just kept creating and creating and creating. That's who he was meant to be. So they share a genetic history, a literary genetic history.
Well, I mean, in Watchmen, there would have been no Rorschach if DC said he couldn't use The Question and Blue Beetle and so on and so on to make Watchmen. That's the only reason we have Rorschach is because he was told, no, you can't do that to our characters.
No, and I love that.
Exactly, but they were a darker version of what had existed previous to that, was kind of my point.
Yeah, but I love that Denny O'Neil doesn't let that dog lie. He in The Question, like I said, number 17, he brings the conversation of Rorschach into The Question. That's just he was like, oh no, y'all might not have let him use it, but we're bringing this over here. Watch this. It's just super cool. Again, Mount Rushmore of comics creators. Well, since Matt, you're not doing a uh, an O'Neil book. What are you doing?
Well, I was wanted to talk about, since we're at the 80th anniversary, we're at the 80th anniversary of the Joker. So I bought this DC 100-page super spectacular issue, as it is titled, All New Tales of the Clown Prince of Crime. This has got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 different stories. Some, the standouts for me were the Brian Azzarello. Well, the Brian Azzarello story is pretty good. And you had one that was illustrated by Eduardo Risso, and that was written by Tom Taylor. So obviously that one's not going to miss. And that one was great, man. Eduardo Risso, I want to see this guy do more Joker stuff. The way he illustrates the Joker is so good. That story was, it's a very, what would you say, small story. It's about the Joker showing up to a child's birthday party, and hilarity ensues. Not really, but it's very well done, illustrated very well. James Tinian IV does a story on here, illustrated by Michael Janin. Paul Dini has a story in here. That one was illustrated by Riley Russo.
Riley Rossmo. Yeah. What's Paul Dini from again?
He is from, some people, Caleb, some people know and appreciate him from the Batman the Animated Series. Made a big splash at one point in time. Appreciated by some people as being some of the best Batman stories ever told.
Yeah,
but that's just some people. Other people prefer, say, I don't know, Michael Bay.
I never said I prefer one or the other. Quit putting more.
So I highly recommend this 80th anniversary collection of new Joker stories. That's very easy to read. They're all, there's 10 stories in here. They're all maybe 10 pages apiece. DC Comics did a very good job of picking extremely strong talent and having them put together stories that are all very good. That doesn't always happen. There's a lot of collections that are done this way, which a lot of the stories feel like throwaways. This is not the way this feels. These all feel very good. By the way, Denny O'Neil has a story in this one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
Has to.
Yeah. So yeah, this one is very much worth reading. It's a lot of fun. The illustrations.
And I stayed away from it because generally I don't love anthology books, so I may have to go back and pick it up.
The creative team is what won me over, because I'm hit or miss on these things. Most of the time I miss. But looking through the creative team, I was like, wow, okay. And then I actually picked this up, and I don't know even how it happened now. I picked this off the shelf on Friday at the same time I discovered that Denny O'Neil had just passed away. And I was standing there in front of Tony at the comic book shop. I said, Denny O'Neil just passed away. And now I don't know how I found that out.
Well, Caleb texted right before that, but I don't know if you saw the text from Caleb.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, this is before any of the text was coming out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there it is. It's definitely worth picking up. I can't recommend it enough. Great short stories.
Sometimes the universe puts you in the right place at the right time, for something to be in front of you while that information hits. It just kind of happens that way.
Right.
So, Craig, you had mentioned these anthology stories aren't necessarily your cup of tea all the time, and we've talked about some of these on the show before. And one thing I think collectively we boil it down to with anthologies, with most anthologies, you're doing good if you have a 50-50 ratio. Like 50% of the stories are better than they're not, because a lot of times you're going to have misses. Like, now that DC's done this several times in the past year, I think back to Action Comics 1000, I actually felt like the stories almost had like a 90% success rate. Like there was a lot of good in those books. But then, was it Detective Comics 1000 that came out, which I like was rough reading for me. I'm trying not to be a revisionist historian. Like that might be flipped, but I think it was Action Comics that I actually liked more than Detective Comics. But it sounds like Matt, it sounds like this was, like I said, 10 stories, way like had a really high success rate across the board.
Yeah, none of them felt like throwaway stories to me, which
Okay.
so often feels
Right.
like somebody threw together real quick, hey, we're doing an appreciation anthology. It's just
Right.
not what these felt like. These were really good.
Good, because that's usually why I buy the ones that like Detective Comics 1000, because I'm buying all the Detective Comics, so I'm going to buy that because it's in that run. But something like the Joker, I'm probably not going to pick it up because the as Caleb puts it, the hit and miss ratio is usually not in favor of spending $10 for a comic.
Right. Is that one 10? Was it $10?
Let me see how much this one was. Yep, $10.
That's why I didn't get it, because I was like, I didn't buy this,
Mm.
but couldn't remember why. But now that I know that it's worth it, I may, like, because you're getting $1 per
Exactly.
story, I may go back and pick it up. So
Exactly.
I'm glad you tested those waters for us. Um, so now I have two directions I can go. Assuming Matt's done, I don't want to cut Matt off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I can go in the Denny O'Neil direction and make a liar out of myself when I told Matt that I wasn't doing a Denny O'Neil book, because when I thought that he might be, I went ahead and pulled something up. Or I can use, also Matt set me up for a nice Brian Azzarello segue. So I will let you two choose. You tell me what I'm doing.
Oh, that's too much pressure. I have a hard enough time deciding what I need to do.
Yeah. Don't ask this man to help you make decisions, Caleb. You'll shut the show down right now to go watch Transformers.
Oh my God.
All right, so I
Do the one you originally set yourself up to do.
well, I don't feel like it actually fits in with the tone of
Okay,
what we've been
then
talking
do
about.
Denny O'Neil.
See, Caleb, I think you should do the opposite of what Craig says too.
Okay, so the book I was going to do, and it was actually the book that I said, damn y'all, I love it. I love it when it's not me being picked on. It makes me feel happy.
Well, we had to take a break from you this week, Caleb.
I'm the man on the verge.
Hey, the show's not over yet.
Well, hey, I've already had mine. Y'all delivered unto me my handful of shit early on. So Matt, you're the only one we really haven't picked on. The book I was going to do was actually the New Comic Day pick I said last week, which was Faithless 2. But I'll let that ruminate with those of you for a little bit. And so the book I'll tell you about was actually, it was in my short stack, because why not? And that book is none other than The Question, number 17, suggested for mature readers, from June of 1988, when I was exactly like 8 months old at that point. Just a little bitty baby.
You would have been a young reader at
I
that
was
point.
ridiculously cute.
You
as a
would
child.
not have been a mature reader
I
and
was
able
not.
to read that book.
I was not, but I was ridiculously adorable. I just need y'all to know that. So this book was written by the great Denny O'Neil. We're going to carry that through. Drawn by Dennis Cowan, the Dennis Cowan, with inks by Rick Magyar. Is it Magyar? Magyar? Willie Schubert did the lettering, Tatiana did the coloring, and Mike Gold did the editing, with a very special thanks to one, Mr. Alan Moore, and Mr. Dave Gibbons, who worked on the Watchmen. And that's important because that, like I said, I've mentioned it several times in this story, he brings the character of Rorschach into this book, because the title of the book is called A Dream of Rorschach. So the question's got some stuff going on, as the question is wont to do in this story. But what's happening is there is a criminal duo that is making his life really kind of miserable. And that duo is Butch and Sundance. If you've read that series, you're probably familiar with them. Sundance is uncouth, kind of a cowboy, as his name might suggest. He's not the most clever of individuals. He's very gravelly in his mannerisms. He's kind of a redneck, is what I'm trying to say. But Butch is not. Butch is arguably sophisticated, kind of sleek. He's a lawyer, or he at least presents himself as a lawyer. So he's kind of greasy. You know, lawyers are all bastards, all of them. They're all bad people. Says the kid in law school. Just to throw that out there, I'm just joking. But Sundance has got himself arrested, right? Like he's in jail, and so Butch is posing as his attorney to go in there and get to him. Now, this is in the middle of a time where they're using incredibly sophisticated, advanced, and futurist technology to keep people safe, and they have a what's called a metal detector that they are making people walk through as they enter the jail to make sure that they don't have any guns or anything on them. I mean, this is really just insane technology at the time. I'm obviously joking, but it's like metal detectors were new at the time, so it was really cool to look back in the world. But Butch is ahead of the game. He has smuggled in a plastic pistol that shoots plastic bullets into the prison. And so, as he's posing as the lawyer, he opens up his briefcase, slides the gun over to Sundance, who promptly shoots the guard, and they just shoot their way out of the police station up to the roof where they are able to catch a helicopter. Because you know how in the '80s helicopters could land anywhere. You remember that time. They like if you ever needed one, you just kind of whistled and a helicopter pulled up like a taxi. That's how '80s comics worked a lot of the times.
I mean, didn't they give Superman a helicopter at one point?
So yeah. He did, and Thanos. Thanos had his own helicopter. And so they fly off. Now, this of course is all predicated on this other scene, and it really is a like one of those iconic scenes from The Question. A man who is a patient of a insane asylum walks out onto a roof of the asylum, and he's just standing there, and he keeps saying like, this is the night, this is the night, the angel of death will fall from the sky, this is the night. One of the nurses or whatever you call him finds him on the roof, and he's like, "Hey man, you gotta come back inside." And he's like, "No, just let me stay here for a little bit longer. I'm not gonna jump. I'm not doing any of that. Like, but this is the night. Don't you know? This is the night. The angel of death will fall from the sky." So about this time, a helicopter flies over, and it's Sundance and Butch, and they're getting the hell out of Dodge, but clinging to one of the landing rails, clutching to it for dear life at this point, is The Question. It's Vic Sage. It's our man. And he's chased them up to the roof. He managed to grab a hold of the helicopter, and as they're flying over the city, he's just trying to keep up with them. But Butch and Sundance know he's there, so they start making the helicopter shake and buck, and they're trying to knock him off. And, well, they're successful. But it just so happens, as Vic Sage falls, he's falling on top of a building, and lo and behold, it's the same building that this insane person has been standing out there saying, "This is the night the angel of death will fall from the sky." And this insane man lifts his arms to the heavens, and Vic Sage crashes into him. Makes a nice little red bloody crater. Vic's okay, but that guy didn't make it. He was right. The angel of death fell from the sky, and he was kind of wrong place, wrong time. Well, the fact that Butch and Sundance were able to escape really pisses Vic Sage off. Like, he's not happy. So he goes back to his gym. He goes back to the place he's hiding, and he's just he's working over a heavy bag, and he's really just mad at himself for letting them escape, because he knows that, number one, he also just landed on a dude and killed him, so he's kind of having a bad day. So he's just upset all around. These are things that don't make him happy. But he gets a phone call, and he gets a tip of where Butch and Sundance might be, so he's going to have to board a plane, and he's going to have to fly to where he can get to him. Of course, Vic is The Question, but he doesn't have the means of Batman. He doesn't have the connections of Superman, so he has to fly coach, as no one wants to do. So as he's boarding the plane, he walks past a newsstand. As I said earlier, he picks up a copy of at the time, this is 1988, Watchmen, which has been blowing up the newsstands at that time. Like, we speak in 2020 about how the Watchmen changed comics, like, from the moment it was published. It had this instantaneous reaction in the comics industry. This is 1988. This is months after that book was published, a mere months after it was published, and those changes are already starting to take into effect. Like, Denny is responding in real time to that. And he's responding to the fact that DC wouldn't let Alan Moore use these characters in The Watchmen. like Rorschach was supposed to be the question. So what Denny is doing is an exercise in comparison and contrast. He has Vic Sage fall asleep on the plane as he's reading Watchmen, and Vic has this dream where he's brought face to face with Rorschach, and the character has to has to question, you know, am I this person? Like, is this what I am, or am I different in somehow? Was this a caricature of me? Like, what does this mean for me? Who in the story is a real figure, which really makes him question his philosophy, his motivation in that moment. But he wakes up from the dream. The plane lands. He's trying to figure out where to start. He needs to make some connections, so he goes, where all crime starts. He goes to the place where he can figure this out, which is a seedy bar called Beanies. As he walks in, and there's these, people are drunk, they're drinking. There's these ne'er-do-wells who are, this is not a classy establishment. This is a dive bar. And the guy walks up. There's this guy, army hat, army jacket, scruffy beard. He's like, let me buy you a drink. I know you. You're Vic Sage. You're the TV reporter from the TV in that one city. And of course, Vic's like, oh, of course, I found the one guy who's traveled out of this town and has seen me on local news stations. But the guy proceeds to just feed him drink after drink, and Vic gets drunk, and Vic knows he shouldn't. Like, Vic's like, I don't want to be drunk. I don't want to be, I don't want to lose my ability to function. But he does. He hadn't eaten all day, and the alcohol hits him a lot quicker. And so he decides to leave. Well, homeboy that got him drunk follows him outside of the bar. And this has all been a setup from the get-go. He knew who he was. And so the dude pulls out a blackjack and just slaps him over the head and starts to rough him up a little bit. And of course, Vic Sage is drunk. He's taken off guard. This like he's not able, like he gets his ass kicked handily for about 2 pages before he's able to like gain his bearings and fight back. And, he gains the upper hand, but it's, nobody wins a street fight, right? Like somebody loses a lot less. Vic just happened to be the person who loses less in this street fight, but he's able to, like, he searches the guy and he finds a couple of clues that's going to help him make some connections and get to where Sundance and Butch might be hiding out. He kind of knows, luckily through the plot of the story, there's something planted that he's able to figure out, which, by the way, you should go pick up this book if you don't know, if you want to see those connections being done really well. Well, Vic goes back to the hotel, kind of cleans up a little bit, sobers up, gets a good night's sleep, brushes his teeth because, well, alcohol in dive bars is not going to leave a good flavor in your mouth. And he gets down to business. He pulls out whatever material turns him into the question, silly putty of crime, and he puts it on his face. He puts the mask on. Of course, this changes his visage. Smoke comes up, and his hair turns from blonde to brown, and his clothes go from reporter clothes to a trench coat, and he is the question. And so he goes about his business. He starts to track these folks down, and he finds clues that leads him up to a snowy mountain. And I don't know if you guys remember where Rorschach died, but it was snowy, and so there's this connective tissue back to what Moore and Gibbons did with the character, and all the while this is sitting in the back of his brain, and making him question, which throws him off balance. Like mentally, it throws him off balance, right? So he's just not in the right frame of mind. Well, he tracks Butch down. He gets to Sundance, and he's outnumbered. He's outtasked. He's in a place that he doesn't know. He's not in the right frame of mind to really do what he needs to do. And it looks like our boy Vic is about to, he's about to lose. And all should say, just for the sake of the question's reputation, he was in a car wreck in the midst of all this. I'm trying not to let out all the good. You should go read this. And so that's also partially why he loses, but it seems like our boy Vic is about to go the way of the dinosaur, man. He's fixing to get iced out in the middle when all of a sudden these arrows start coming out of the snowy darkness. One of them pierces Sundance's hand. One of them hits a few of their goons, and as Vic is kind of reeling and in a foggy state of having his ass kicked, he looks over, and who does he see? But the Green Arrow, Ollie himself. Low rent Robin Hood, who says, I'm the good guy and I'm here to help you. To be continued. And this is going to go on to be one of the most memorable team ups of, you think of team ups with Green Arrow and you think of Green Lantern, but this goes on to be an incredible team up between the Question and Green Arrow, which, Green Arrow is a bleeding heart, uber liberal figure. The Question is this, I don't think it's fair to say objectivist figure, but he's an extension of Ditko's ideology of, he's not parroting Ayn Randianism, but he's certainly a footstone on the step to Randianism.
Yeah.
So seeing those two put together is neat. I read that issue this morning too. It's really well done, and it's Denny O'Neil, and what do you expect? And Dennis Cowan doing what Dennis Cowan does best in these stories is fantastic. So I picked this up on Comixology just because these books are hard to find. I at some point would love to put together a full run or have an omnibus of this, which I know exists. Our buddy David Price from the EOC podcast was posting pictures of it, flipping through, which is one of the reasons I knew to go check this out. So thanks to him. But man, just fun times. Comics that stand the test of time. Like I said, 88. This book is a year younger than I am, and
oh my God.
It's
I know, right? I graduated high school in '89.
Jesus Christ.
I'm the baby.
So,
gotta love me.
On the topic of the Question, of course, I know Craig hasn't, but Caleb, have you seen the animated version of the Question by chance?
I haven't. I know it exists. It's no, I haven't seen
Okay.
it.
Are you going to give him shit now?
So if you go back and watch the Justice League animated series that followed Batman the animated series, look it up, Craig. The Question is, makes a few appearances. They found a guy to do the voice of the Question. It's amazing. This guy is perfect, and he's got a very unique voice. If you have any interest, in the character of the Question, that's one of the versions I highly recommend checking out. Really, really good depiction of that character in that cartoon series.
I'll have to look it up. I'm curious because I need to read more Question. He's somebody that
should
really
that
like.
be after I read Batman or watch Batman animated or before?
At this point, Craig, it doesn't matter. You're lost. You're lost. You're so late to the game. You don't even know what the rules are.
When did the Batman animated series come out?
That came out in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was in my mid-20s then. So I really was not at that point in my life when I was caring about cartoons too much.
How does that explain the last 25 years? How many excuses have you piled up to excuse the last 25 to 30 years where you could have gone back and watched this show? Several times, I might add you. I've watched the entire series several times over for the richness that it brings.
Craig has offended.
It's the same reason you watch Michael Bay's Transformer movies, is the richness that it brings your soul. Well, that's where I find
Craig has
comfort in Batman
offended the very
series.
delicacy of Matt's nature.
I love every moment of it.
Just the depiction of Bane alone is magic that they made
Which
this
is why
cartoon
you
for
should watch
kids.
the Harley Quinn show.
Oh my God, dude! The depiction of Bane in the Harley Quinn show is baby stuff. You watch him in the animated series. That's where it's at, man. I'm like,
Okay.
I remember watching it as a kid, and it scared the shit out of me. That first episode where Bane shows up, dude, it's amazing. You son of a bitch, Craig.
He's just mad because now he has to rewatch it.
Oh shit! I love
There's
you
the
guys.
title of your episode.
You son of a- I really do love you guys. Well, I'm not joking, man. I needed this morning and most mornings, but especially today. Thank you guys for this hour and a half. We really didn't plan on it being a celebration of Denny O'Neil, but I'm glad it turned into that because this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
81 years old, man, and you know what? Went out incredible. This is one of those times where, sure, you think about you lament his passing, but you really do just celebrate a life well lived.
And again, just
Yep.
thankful for what he left us as a artist,
Yeah.
for us to be able to go back on for the forever. People will always have a chance to read those books.
Yep. Makes me happy. I'm glad we spent this time this morning. I really am. But look, at one point in time, Mr. Denny O'Neil had books coming out on New Comic Book Day, which is
Did he?
Yeah, in 1988 when I was
Actually, he had them coming out last week.
Did he?
That's right. Yeah, I bought it.
In Matt's book. Yeah.
Oh, true. I was right. I wasn't thinking. Sorry, sidetracked. But
see, at least Matt, I at least pay attention to what you say.
Thank you very much.
Okay, but his name was the Pinnacle, but it was one of many. I wasn't thinking about an ongoing
I'm
series.
totally
That
playing.
was a one
I'm
shot.
totally playing.
Did he work on the Question Black Label book? I don't have it sitting in front of me.
No, that was Lemire.
No.
I know Dennis Cowan did.
It was
Bill
Lemire.
Sienkiewicz did some of that too.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he had any hand in that. Anyway, Wednesdays are whatever. Wednesdays are New Comic Book days for the most part. Although rumor has it Tuesdays are also going to be a day where some new comics come out from henceforth, but that's going to be an interesting transition. You can go back and listen to our last episode to figure out some of our thoughts on that, and you should. It was fun. But I'm curious about what you guys are excited about coming out this next week. What should folks pick up? And let's kind of go in order of what we did with our books.
Okay, I'll go first. Hotell #2 by AWA Upshots, John Lee, Dalibor, Talajic, and Karen Andrews. If you guys remember, I did the first issue of this as my book of the week before the pandemic hit, and AWA had to shut down. I really enjoyed this book, and each issue is going to be pretty much a standalone story as far as I can tell, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Nice. I've been loving AWA's stuff, man.
Yeah. Always excited for new publishers that come around with a different idea on how to tell stories, and that's what AWA is doing.
Crushing it.
Yep.
What you got, Matt?
So I changed my what's on the menu because the one I picked at first, I knew one of you two would pick. So I'm going to talk about Killing Red Sonja #2 from Dynamite. Prince Cyril's plan to murder Sonja the Red is diverted due to battles with giants. From the battles come a discovery, and a mysterious collection of allies begins to unite. And the cover image of this book is like one of my fantasies brought to life. It's amazing. The cover image of this book.
I really enjoyed the first issue of that book because it's now giving us the story from the prince's standpoint. Well, you have Sonja doing her thing in her book. It's an interesting take, and having Mark Russell involved with it's good too. So,
yeah, man, that cover image. Oh boy. Next.
Well, I'm now curious to know what the book Matt knew that one of the two of us was going to pick up. So if I don't name it, go ahead and toss it out at the end there, Matt. But I think you all would do well to pick up a book that's coming out next week called Wynd.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, cool. #1, and this is written really cool. And I didn't pick up on this until actually during the show while I was listening to you guys talk. I was looking at some stuff. This is written by James Tynion, and it's being drawn by Michael Dialnis. I think is how you pronounce his last name. But that's the same team, if I'm not mistaken, that did The Woods, right?
I'm not. I mean, Tynion was definitely the writer, and I'm drawing a blank on the.
Michael Dialnis is like one. He's listed on The Woods, so
okay. I just was drawing a blank.
They worked in some capacity there together. He's also done work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I mean, look, James Tynion IV is working on everything. I mean, he's his name,
killing it right now
several times. So in this story, I'm going to read you the synopsis. Magical heritage is punishable by death in this town called Pipe Town. So a young boy named Wynd must keep his true identity and pointy ears a secret from everyone if it means he'll ever have a normal life. But of course, somebody's going to threaten his secret. There are metaphors abundant that can be applied to this.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't wait to read this. I'm completely sold, and yeah, go check it out. And I'm
Is he
glad
going to wear a beanie through the whole thing?
maybe.
Yeah.
He doesn't have one. He doesn't have one on the cover image. The cover image is him like jumping from rooftop to rooftop, and he's kind of got this very shaggy, motley hair. Yeah, the hair.
Okay.
Like,
So
you know,
I got okay. That was a really weird question to ask. So why the disdain for beanies?
There's no disdain. I was just asking, or if they were going to do like the sweatband, like Spock did in Voyage Home.
deep cuts.
I mean, we're a little out of the time. No one wears sweatbands anymore, so the only thing I could think of was beanies. But shaggy hair would do it as well.
Or a fashionable hat of some sort. No, he's got the whole Harry Potter look going on. So
Gotcha.
So I digs it. Well, guys, we got anything else we need to cover to hit on before we get out of here?
No, I think we hit it all.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Salute to
sauce.
Dennis O'Neil.
Yeah.
Big salute. 6 collective thumbs up, and like I said, man, life well lived. Thanks for all the memories and the art, man. What you brought
For
to the
sure.
table. You set the table that we are lucky to eat at, and that's pretty amazing. Well, all right. So if you have enjoyed this episode, I got to do my little housekeeping bit here at the end, and you want more of it. You want more conversation. Maybe we left some Denny O'Neil stuff off that you just think is the pinnacle of his career. You can bring that stuff to our Facebook group where we are always hanging out. When we're busy, we don't post as much, but that's why we need the listeners to post. We got to get you guys throwing stuff up, and for the most part, there's been some really cool posts in this past week that have spurred on a lot of conversation, and we really appreciate that because we drive this bus, but there's a lot of perspectives out there that need to get brought out, and that helps us learn, and it helps us expand our readership and what we're looking at. So thanks. If you want to see panels and pictures of what we're reading, you can hit us up on Instagram and follow us there, or Twitter. We're at SFG on both of those things. If you are a creator, or if you have a question or something, you can shoot an email to us. We're southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. Follow us on whatever you want to. Let your friends who might be comics fans know about the podcast. Word of mouth is about the best thing that spreads the podcast. And so we really appreciate those of you who have shared this, who have let folks in your community know about us, and who have helped grow our listenership, because we appreciate that in a big way. Thank you. You're amazing, and we owe you an incredible favor for doing that, and it lets us know that we're doing something right, so we try. But all right, we will be back here where you can find us, same bat time, same bat channel, every Sunday where we record this podcast. Most Sundays we flex a little bit, but we hope you come back for more, and if nothing else, go forth and love some comics.
Woo!
Just want to point out that was an excellent woo, Craig.
Excellent show. Deserved an excellent woo.